For decades, public health data has shown a divergence. While traditional cardiovascular risk factors like smoking rates and high LDL cholesterol have largely stabilized, global body mass averages have continued climbing aggressively. Medical science operated on a logical hypothesis. Obesity correlates with heart disease. Therefore, using pharmacology to lower a patient's body mass should, in theory, reduce their risk of cardiovascular mortality. But translating that hypothesis into clinical reality failed repeatedly. Early generations of weight loss interventions, specifically drugs like sibutramine and rimonabant, were introduced to manage obesity in high-risk patients. These drugs successfully drove patient weight down, but major clinical trials revealed a critical disconnect. The cardiovascular outcomes did not improve. In some specific cases, the risks worsened, leading to the rapid withdrawal of these agents from the market. The clinical community realized they possessed tools to treat the outward symptom of excess mass, but remained powerless to treat the underlying cardiovascular risk associated with it. This dynamic shifted with the introduction of glucagon-like peptide-1, or GLP-1, receptor agonists. These compounds were originally developed as a targeted therapy for glycemic control in type 2 diabetes, binding to specific receptors to stimulate insulin release. Because of the checkered history of earlier metabolic drugs, regulatory agencies mandated strict safety testing to ensure GLP-1s wouldn't harm the heart. During those safety trials, researchers observed an unexpected drop in major adverse cardiovascular events. The data gathered in those trials forced a reevaluation of the drug class. Based on these results, clinical leaders are positioning GLP-1s as a foundational tool for heart health, often calling them the statins of the 21st century. Two foundational trials, SUSTAIN-6 and SELECT, provided the evidence required to bridge the gap between diabetes care, weight management, and long-term cardiovascular health. The underlying logic of this shift targets obesity as a primary, pharmacologically modifiable cardiovascular risk factor. The evidence starts with the SUSTAIN-6 trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Designed as a non-inferiority study, the trial enrolled 3,297 high-risk patients with type 2 diabetes. This table outlines baseline patient characteristics, establishing a severe health profile. Average age was 64, body weight 92 kilograms. Over 60% had ischemic heart disease, and 32% a prior myocardial infarction. Metabolically, mean glycated hemoglobin sat at 8.7%, despite standard regimens. The clinical goal here was minimal. The FDA merely required Novo Nordisk to prove that semaglutide did not increase the rate of heart failure or stroke in these vulnerable patients. Achieving positive outcomes in a population where 83% already had established cardiovascular or kidney disease would represent a significant pharmacological result. This Kaplan-Meier plot details the primary outcome, a 26% risk reduction in cardiovascular events. Panel B confirms a 26% reduction in heart attacks. Panel C reveals a 39% drop in non-fatal strokes. However, Panel D shows overall mortality curves remaining largely overlapping. The clinical efficiency of the intervention was high. The number needed to treat to prevent one major cardiovascular event over 24 months was 45 patients. Semaglutide performed as a powerful neurovascular and cardiovascular shield, decisively beating the modest safety expectations required for approval. These line graphs map the drug's performance on standard metabolic metrics. Panel A tracks glycated hemoglobin, and Panel B tracks body weight. Over 104 weeks, patients on the 1.0 milligram dose saw the steepest drops, solidifying the drug's metabolic function. But looking at the timeline introduces a clinical anomaly. The cardiovascular event curves we saw earlier began to diverge almost immediately after treatment started. That early cardiovascular divergence occurred months before the weight loss and blood sugar reductions were fully realized. The timeline of protection outpaces the timeline of weight reduction. This suggests pleiotropy. The data implies the drug exerts direct pharmacological benefits on endothelial function, reducing vascular inflammation independently of weight loss. Semaglutide acts as a vascular stabilizer. It protects the circulatory system long before patients reach goal weight. This table details secondary microvascular outcomes. The renal benefit is clear. New or worsening nephropathy was lower in the semaglutide group. However, an unexpected safety signal emerged. Retinopathy complications increased in the semaglutide group, carrying a hazard ratio of 1.76. In clinical context, retinopathy complications are often a side effect of rapid glucose lowering. When blood sugar drops quickly, it can temporarily stress pre-existing microvascular damage in the eye. While the drug offers macrovascular and renal protection, clinical management requires monitoring microvascular eye health during periods of rapid metabolic improvement. If the cardiovascular benefit is independent of glucose lowering, can the drug protect people who are overweight but do not have diabetes? To answer that, the SELECT trial enrolled 17,604 overweight or obese patients without diabetes, administering the higher 2.4 mg dose of semaglutide. The SELECT trial confirmed the drug's efficacy across the broader population, resulting in a 20% reduction in major adverse cardiovascular events for non-diabetic patients. These results addressed the obesity paradox by providing evidence that pharmacologically treating obesity directly reduces mortality. Based on this evidence, semaglutide has become a foundational tool for secondary cardiovascular prevention in obese patients across the board. The current success of GLP-1 injectables represents only the first generation of a shift. Industry projections anticipate this market will reach $150 billion by 2035. The pipeline of next-generation assets is already well underway. Eli Lilly's orforglipron is designed as a once-daily oral pill, formulated to remove the food and water restrictions associated with current oral GLP-1 treatments. Even further down the pipeline is retatrutide. This is a triple hormone agonist engineered to target the GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon receptor simultaneously, driving increased weight loss and functional outcomes. As the pharmacology improves, the industry has to solve for real-world effectiveness. The focus is shifting toward preserving patient lean muscle mass during weight loss and ensuring long-term adherence. These next-generation drugs face market pressures, including regulatory scrutiny, evolving drug pricing reforms under the Inflation Reduction Act, and global supply chain constraints. The decade ahead belongs to multi-receptor agonists. These agents are maturing into a class of lifelong cardiometabolic stabilizers.